Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now, joining you live myself from Colorado Springs, Colorado, where the 40th Annual Space Symposium is currently underway. Hopefully, you've had a chance to catch our YouTube Shorts videos that we posted, giving you a couple of highlights from the big news items of the week. Got, of course, another one coming later on today, or perhaps early tomorrow morning once we get all the big news headlines buttoned up from today. But it's been a good conference so far. Looking forward to sharing many stories with you in the days and weeks to come from our time here. But of course, right now, the item du jour is what you see in front of you. You're looking at an Atlas V rocket in its most powerful configuration. This is an Atlas V 551, which means there are 5 solid rocket boosters from Northrop Grumman that are surrounding the Atlas booster. ULA is targeting a liftoff during a 2-hour window, which opens up at 7 p.m. Eastern, 2300 UTC for those joining around the world. If you take a look in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, that L- time is counting down to the start of the window, 7 o'clock. So we're just about 51.5 minutes away from that point. Once the clock does get a little bit further, about L- 19, that will be the point at which the ULA countdown clock hits T- 4 minutes. There's a planned 15-minute hold where they make their final assessments before proceeding into the terminal count. As we're tracking the progress, we're also, of course, keeping a close eye on the weather, taking a look at the wide shot here from our turn base in Camry. Clouds are very much making their presence known, currently T- 36 minutes on the T- countdown timeline. Tanking of the Atlas V rocket has been going generally smoothly this afternoon. But right now, the weather is currently 80% no-go during the launch window. So meteorologists, the 45th Weather Squadron, as well as United Launch Alliance, keeping a very close eye and tracking all the possible options that they have for getting this mission off the ground here over the course of that 2-hour window. Of course, an Atlas V, different from a Falcon 9 in the fact that it can hold its countdown if it needs to for the duration of the window. So unlike a Falcon 9 rocket where when tanking begins, that means SpaceX is committing to a T0, ULA has more flexibility. Just passing T- 35 minutes, as you can see, L- 49 minutes and some change, just past the 50-minute mark. As we're getting things rolling here, I want to thank the more than 1,900 of you who are watching with us live this afternoon, evening, whatever time it is in your part of the world. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, sharing the stream, allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also want to thank our moderators in the live chat for helping us out today. See, we've got Rick Donner, Clistia Lee, Jeff Hansen joining with us here. Astro Joe, good to see you. Just scrolling to see if there's any of the other mods hanging out today that I have not seen. If any of the other mods do cruise on in, be sure to give them a big Spaceflight Now hello. And you can help make their job just a little bit easier by following the rules of the live chat. We ask that you refrain from using all caps, converse in English so that our moderators can respond appropriately. Remember, this is not a political forum, so we ask that you refrain from delving into overt politics here in the live chat. And perhaps most importantly, just be kind and respectful to one another, since this launch could be someone's first. And if they ask a question that may seem obvious to you, it may not be obvious to them. So just extend them the same courtesy as you would have liked the first time you saw a launch, whether it was live with us or with your own eyes. I want to give a big shout out to our channel member community here on YouTube who make these trips possible, these reporting trips, so we can be on the ground here with the newsmakers, as news is very much happening all the time across the Space Symposium. It's a lot to keep up with, and the ability to run into folks just in passing across the exhibit floor can make all the difference in a conference like this. So I want to thank everyone here. Just for the call, Centaur liquid hydrogen is now at 70% filled. We'll go over the other propellant tank fill points in just a second, but want to conclude shouting out our channel member community here and thank some folks. Ryan Snyder, Joni Mahoney, Cumulus Granatus, Butterfly, Sulfur for Lunch, Rocket Girl, and many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in the Cape in 4K. Want to thank channel member moderator Rick Donner and Callistia Lee for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships each. So to our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Rick and Callistia in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Just as a reminder, when someone does gift channel membership, it is entirely random to whom it will be gifted. So we have no control. The gifter has no control. You might get lucky, and we hope you decide to stick around as a channel member. Speaking of sticking around, Joni Mahoney marking 4 months with us as a member at the Mission Specialist level. Centaur liquid hydrogen now at 80% filled. Also, the Rocket Girl marking 8 months with us at the Mission Specialist level. Appreciate you being with us this long, Rocket Girl, who says, I'm so happy to be celebrating my birthday with the best community ever, and to have an Atlas V launching on this special day. Go Atlas, go ULA, go Spaceflight Now. A very happy birthday to you, Rocket Girl. Hope beyond just hopefully seeing a rocket launch, weather permitting, got some other fun things planned for your special day. Also, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space and spaceflight, you can follow the lead of Don Pierce by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will he be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the remainder of the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. This Atlas V designation is AV-107, the 107th Atlas V rocket that is getting ready to launch here in potentially 45 minutes if the weather does improve. Currently T-minus 30 minutes. Again, the difference between the L-minus and the T-minus times. The L-minus is counting down towards the opening of the window as liquid hydrogen on the Centaur upper stage is now at 90% filled. Just before the top of the hour, the Atlas booster stage, its liquid oxygen tank, finished filling. The booster uses a combination of liquid oxygen and RP1, a highly refined kerosene, to power the RD-180 main engine on the booster stage. Powers it for about 4 minutes of flight, starting with liftoff, of course. For those who may recall, with the previous Atlas launch, the RP-1 is not actually loaded on board the rocket on the day of launch, but rather shortly after the point where ULA rolls the rocket about 1/3 of a mile from the vertical integration facility out to the pad where you see it currently live. And then they load the roughly 25,000 gallons of RP-1 onto the booster stage. So at this point, The Atlas booster is fully fueled. The LOX tank, just hearing, call it the liquid hydrogen tank, actually is at 96%. This is United Launch Alliance's first mission of the year, though far from the last. They've got a number of flights that are scheduled for the back end of 2025, a combination of Atlas as well as Vulcan launches. For those not hyper plugged in and following the Vulcan rocket program, that vehicle was certified to support national security missions. That happened just in the last couple of weeks, as a matter of fact. That allowed ULA to move forward with plans to launch the first of its national security missions with Vulcan. That is a flight for the U.S. Space Force called USSF 106. You can read more about the payload that's going to be flying on that mission. Got an article up on our website, spaceflightnow.com, that you can peruse at your leisure. That mission will be followed by USSF 87, the second of the missions that was awarded to ULA as part of, it's called the National Security Space Launcher NSSL Phase 2 launch contract. The way that these national security missions predominantly work is the U.S. Space Force's Space Systems Command will select its main two providers. At least this is how it worked for Phase 1 and Phase 2. They select the two providers. They compete for either 60% of the launches or 40% of the launches, and that's how they're divvied up. So for the first two phases, ULA was selected as designee number 1 and got 60% of the launches, roughly speaking, and SpaceX got 40%. The way that they're doing national security missions now is they have two different lanes within Phase 3. Lane 1 is a much lower threshold to entry, and it allows for commercial launch providers to on-ramp and to compete for those launch contracts year to year. And you just have to have flown one successful launch with your rocket by the time you are awarded a mission. So it allows a lot of companies to potentially get into the pipeline. But the much more dynamic and strenuous launches and more energetic orbits and potentially sensitive payloads that need a very high level of mission assurance, those are still awarded in the 60-40 breakdown, like with Phase 1 and 2. This time around, though, SpaceX was given the 60% of the Phase 3 Lane 2 missions. ULA got 40, but then they also are setting aside 7 missions that will be flown by a third provider, which is Blue Origin with its New Glenn rocket. First order year as part of fiscal year 2025 has been awarded within the last couple of days. Actually, it was just at the beginning of Space Symposium. SpaceX received 7 missions. ULA received 2, each of them getting one of the GPS-3 follow-on satellites to launch as part of the Phase 3 Lane 2 Year 1 task order. Update on the Centaur upper stage liquid hydrogen tank. The filling on that has now been completed. Currently L 38 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Again, the L- clock is running to the opening of the window, which is 7 p.m. Eastern, 2300 UTC. And ULA does have a 2-hour window extending to 9 p.m. Eastern. So still plenty of margin, but once the T- clock hits T- 4 minutes, there will be a planned 15-minute hold for a final assessment to see if they're good to proceed into the terminal count. Now, currently L minus 35 minutes, about 42 seconds and counting. Want to bring you this perspective from one of our photographers, Michael Kane, who's getting ready to shoot the Atlas V, assuming it's able to launch if the weather improves. Want to draw your attention to another facet that we're watching out here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Obviously, in the center of your screen, you're seeing the Atlas V rocket there at Space Launch Complex 41, or Slick 41. Just to its left, you can see the crew access tower. That's the slightly darker gray structure. If you bring your eyes to the right of all that, you see a building with the ULA logo. That's the Vertical Integration Facility, or the VIF, known as the VIF-G. And it's about a third of a mile from VIF-G to the pad there. But I want to bring your attention now all the way to the right-hand side of your screen with the building that has some exposed areas at the top, and you can see some of the side paneling on the left-hand side of the building from our perspective here is starting to come into play. That is VIF A. This is the second track that ULA has been putting hundreds of millions of dollars into making improvements on, part of what the large launch purchase that has come from Amazon in preparing to launch its Project Kyper satellites, which is why we're here today. We'll talk more about Amazon here in just a minute. But in order to ramp up their launch cadence, ULA has created this second VIF, which will be able to allow them to toggle back and forth between preparing Vulcan rockets and Atlas simultaneously, or potentially two Vulcan rockets, one at VIF G and one at VIF A on the right-hand side of your screen. This second VIF, VIF A, is expected to come online before the end of the year. ULA has plans to launch somewhere in the ballpark of about a dozen missions this year, a rough split between Atlases and Vulcans. And so having this second VIF as a good staging point where they can prepare Vulcan flights if they need to launch an Atlas mission at the same time. Right now, the Atlases need to be stacked and have the booster integrated with the stalled rocket boosters and the Centaur upper stage and the payload. That all happens at VIF G. But having the second VIF A will allow Vulcan to be vertically integrated at the same time, so saving ULA a lot of time with their vertical integration process. Update now on the tanking process for the Atlas V rocket. Mentioned a little bit ago that the topping of the liquid hydrogen tank had been completed. How this works, though, is they will continue in a topping off mode until they are ready to pressurize the tanks and go into the terminal count. However, they have entered into a stop flow on the liquid hydrogen for the Centaur upper stage at this point and have convened the anomaly team to review an issue that they're trying to sort out before they resume top off on the liquid hydrogen for the upper stage of the Atlas V. We'll let you know when there's been a resolution on that, but just go ahead and put a pin in that, and we'll come back and revisit it as we have more information to relay. Now, well, minus 28 minutes and counting as we are tracking towards the opening of the window and are just about 13 minutes, or excuse me, about 23 minutes away from the point at which the L minus clock and the T minus clock would sync up. I want to go ahead and give you an overview, courtesy of ULA, of what the flight is going to look like once this Atlas V rocket leaves the pad. Let's go ahead and roll this clip.
Following final confirmation of rocket readiness, the RD-180 engine and 5 GEM-63 solid rocket boosters ignite to produce more than 2 million pounds of thrust, lifting ULA's Atlas V rocket away from the pad. Shortly after liftoff, the rocket begins a pitchover to attain the proper flight path while minimizing the dynamic pressure it experiences during flight. Atlas then reaches Mach 1, the speed of sound. The addition of 5 solid rocket boosters, or SRBs, precisely augment the liftoff thrust of the Atlas V, giving it the power to deliver the payload to orbit. With their propellant expired approximately 96 seconds into ascent, the SRBs burn out, followed by jettison. Atlas's guidance system then begins steering towards the precise target in space. Amazon's Kyper satellites are encapsulated inside a 5-meter diameter payload fairing, which provides protection to the spacecraft during ascent. After crossing the Kármán line, entering space, the payload fairing is jettisoned. With the majority of propellant expended fighting against the force of gravity, the RD-180 engine shuts down and the booster stage separates. The rocket then begins second stage flight, weighing less than 7% of what it did at liftoff. ULA's high-performance Centaur, with its RL-10 engine, ignites, powering the upper stage and spacecraft into a circular low-Earth orbit. The first burn comes to an end with engine shutdown, followed by Centaur orienting into the proper position to release Amazon's Project Kyper satellites to begin building their low Earth orbit satellite broadband network.
And that video again, courtesy of ULA. Currently L minus 25 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. At this point in time, the weather still remains 80% no-go for weather. And it's certainly going to be a tricky thing to navigate as ULA gets closer to the point in which they are going to enter into their planned 15-minute hold. Now L minus 23 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. Again, this L minus time, for those who may just be joining us here recently, is counting down towards the opening of the launch window today, which begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, 2300 UTC. Weather still remains 80% no-go at this point in time. According to Launch Weather Officer Brian Belson, the violation for the cumulus cloud rule should be clear by 8 p.m. Eastern, so an hour into the 2-hour window. But emphasizes as well, there is no estimate on when the gusty winds will ease. That's per United Launch Alliance. Now L minus 22 minutes and counting. As you are no doubt aware by being here for our live launch coverage, this is a big mission for technology company Amazon. This is the first launch of their production Kyper satellites. You may recall back in October of 2023, they launched a couple of prototype satellites on another Atlas V rocket.
For the cumulus cloud rule. But the other issue that we're monitoring as well, in addition to the showers and the cumulus cloud rule, is the wind situation. So that low is bringing in some pretty strong winds coming from the north along the coast here. And you can see these red numbers here. So this is gusts in miles per hour. So currently we're seeing gusts near the pad here in the low 30s miles per hour. So we're monitoring that situation. It has come down a little bit in the last couple of hours, but still elevated right now. So we're getting the showers and the associated strong winds associated with this low that is sitting off the coast. So we're going to need the showers to push a little bit farther to the east, and we're also going to need these winds to come down as the evening progresses. So some of the model guidance is indicating that the winds are going to come down a little bit, so that's what the launch weather team is going to be monitoring. Currently, our probability of violation is 80% at the opening of the window and trending down to 60% as we go towards the ends of that 2-hour launch window. So not saying that there isn't any hope, and if there is a window of favorable weather, the launch weather team is going to find it. Guys, back to you.
And a good launch weather update from Brian Cizik, who we've had the pleasure of talking to a number of times during our live launch broadcasts. He's busy monitoring the weather. The broadcast is coming from ULA, and the teams are on console in the ASOC. Currently in the planned 15-minute hold now. Again, just as a reference point, you see the T-minus clock. Just getting an update from Mission Control. They are going to be extending the T0 as they are continuing to troubleshoot. I believe there's still the issue with the liquid hydrogen on the Centaur upper stage. The recommendation was made to extend the planned hold at T-minus 4 minutes, which would have lapsed when the L-minus clock and the T-minus clock synced up. However, they are making some assessments on an issue that is still being worked out. I believe this is still the anomaly connected to the liquid hydrogen system, which is why they stopped topping off on that now some time ago. Now, a hold, again, for those who are just joining us, a hold for an Atlas V launch, or for that matter, for a Vulcan rocket, does not mean that we are in a scrub scenario. An Atlas rocket and a Vulcan rocket have the ability to hold their countdown for an extended period of time as the launch window extends out to 9 p.m. Eastern, or 2300 UTC, or excuse me, 0100 UTC is at the end of the window there. So just as a quick recap, ULA entered into the planned 15-minute hold as expected. Shortly after that hold was activated, then they conferred and determined that they needed to extend this planned hold beyond the planned time. And so we're going to dip beyond the 15 minutes that was initially determined, not because of the weather explicitly right now, but they're extending the T0 because of an issue that is being worked on the rocket. We believe this is connected to the liquid hydrogen issue that was mentioned in mission control audio here about, at this point, 10-15 minutes ago. Standing by for further information, and we'll, of course, keep you updated as we learn more. You're watching live coverage from Spaceflight now of Amazon's Kyper 1 mission. You may also see this referred to as KA-01 or Kyper Atlas 1. That's how Amazon is referring to it, because Amazon has booked more than 80 missions on various launch providers' rockets. It initially booked 9 flights of the Atlas V. That was followed a couple of years after that by a purchase of 38 launches on a ULA Vulcan rocket. You had 18 flights on an Ariane 6 from Arianespace. 12 flights with a Blue Origin New Glenn rocket with an option to add 15 additional flights if needed or wanted. And then the most recent acquisition was for 3 launches on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket after some pressure from shareholders to book the Falcon 9 to fly some of these Kyper missions. In total, the Project Kyper satellite internet constellation, which is designed to rival other satellite internet mega constellations like SpaceX's Starlink and Eutelsat's OneWeb constellation. Amazon is planning for a total of 3,232 satellites, which will be in low Earth orbit, and they'll be deployed across dozens of planes at altitudes of, start with miles and convert that to kilometers for our global audience. So in miles, it's 367, 379, and 391 miles in altitude, or 590, 610, and 630 kilometers. In a media roundtable at the beginning of the Space Symposium earlier this week, ULA President and CEO Tori Bruno noted that in addition to this Atlas launch that we are tracking right now. Again, still in, I guess you could say we're still technically in the planned part of the planned hold, but we know that this is going to extend beyond 4 minutes out from 7 o'clock Eastern. A new T0 has not yet been announced. When one is, we'll adjust our L minus clock in the upper right hand corner of your screen. But in addition to this mission, Tori Bruno noted that they may be able to launch another Atlas V rocket with Kuiper satellites on board. And that would happen in the time frame before they get ready to launch their first national security mission with Vulcan. Those national security missions are set to launch sometime over the summer, although the U.S. Space Force's Space Systems Command has not named a particular launch date for that just yet. Of course, you can always head over to our website, spaceflightnow.com, click on the launch schedule tab, and you can see when upcoming launches from here in Florida and elsewhere around the world are coming up. As we're coming up to the top of the hour here, I want to thank first off the 8,400 plus of you who are watching with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to click that like button, share the stream, allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. And for those of you who are just joining now, thinking that we were 11 minutes away from the launch of this Kyper 1 mission, and then you see the hold sign, we are currently monitoring and we do have a new T0 to report. ULA is currently targeting 7:40 p.m. Eastern, 2340 UTC. We're adjusting our countdown clock to reflect the new L minus time. Stand by. As you can see, we're now back to L minus 50 minutes and some change. Now currently L minus 48 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Just want to quickly address something while we've got the T minus clock from ULA up on the screen. Right now, just to give you a sense of what we're looking at, actually you're seeing 3 of the solid rocket boosters from Northrop Grumman. There are two others on the opposite side of the booster stage. Actually, you can see them now in this perspective. And the reason that an Atlas V rocket, unlike a Vulcan, which can have 6 solid rocket boosters, the most that an Atlas V can have is 5, and that's because there's a propellant line that is on the exterior of the booster that would be in the spot where a 5th solid rocket booster or a 6th solid rocket booster could be. Anyway, briefly back to the countdown clock. You can see the T-minus clock is remaining frozen at T-minus 4 minutes. The L-minus clock is counting down to the planned T0. And once the L-minus clock hits 4 minutes, assuming that there isn't another reason to extend the T0, then the two will be in sync and will enter into the terminal count.
Tank. That was simultaneous with the SRV cycle test going on. The pressure got a little higher than we intended it to, but the Flumon test took the appropriate action to bring the tank back down. We have no concerns for vehicle health or proceeding with today's operation. We'll document on NDR to address corrective action in the future and recommend proceeding.
LC concurs. LD.
LD concurs.
LC PNE2.
Go PNE2.
LH2 conditioning complete.
Roger.
And some good news there. They were just hearing from the mission control that they have cleared the issue. They have cleared the issue with the liquid hydrogen system on the Centaur upper stage. The planned work was approved by the launch director, and they are moving back to proceeding with liquid hydrogen top-off.
for the
Let's listen
cumulus
in to
cloud
Brian
rule.
Cizik with
And
weather.
we're also monitoring the winds at the ground level as well. So here's why we're no-go for the cumulus cloud rule. Notice these showers that are off the coast here. Now they're not directly over the launch pad, which is about right here, but because they're fairly tall, they could hold a charge. And actually, if they get to a certain level, the minus 20 Celsius level, it's a 10 nautical mile standoff from the launch pad and the flight path. So that's likely what we're dealing with here. These are pretty tall showers. So the launch weather team is monitoring this. We're watching the motion here. So notice that they are pushing to the south and maybe a little bit to the east. So if we could get these to push a little bit farther to the east and get outside of that 10 nautical mile range, we could potentially clear that cumulus cloud rule. Now we're also watching some more showers that are developing farther to the north. Now again, they look like they're trying to push a little bit farther to the east, but again, the team will be monitoring these other showers that are starting to come in from the north. And then if we switch to winds, this is the other weather factor that we're monitoring here tonight. So notice the red numbers here. So that is the gusts right along these our weather towers here at the Cape and KSC. We're monitoring the wind. So notice that the gusts are in the low to mid 30s. We're seeing some peaks miles per hour. So again, we're going to need some of those gusts to come down in addition to the showers pushing a little bit farther away from the launch pad. So those are the two factors. It does look like it is improving marginally as we go towards the end of the window. So again, the POV currently 80% at the opening of the window, but as we push later, it does look like it improves a little bit. So that's what the team's going to be watching. Again, as I mentioned, if we can find a gap in the weather and if we could find some good conditions, the launch weather team will give that go call. So guys, back to you.
And another good weather update from Launch Weather Officer Brian Cizik. As he was describing things, and mentioning the windy conditions, did see that a weather advisory, a strong wind warning, was issued, calling for winds at between 25 knots, gusting to 35, across both the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That's why you're hearing the wind pretty periodically cut across our microphone. So we're keeping it at a semi-low volume so it's not just completely overwhelming the commentary here, but that is the additional noise. We don't want to blank it out completely, because part of the experience of gearing up for a launch is hearing the sounds as well as seeing the sights. You get a nice pad level view in front of some of the tanks there here at Space Launch Complex 41. If this weren't a launch that we were trying to get off the ground here, you could appreciate the nice sunset peeking through the clouds here from this perspective. However, as we were hearing from Brian, the cumulus cloud rule still hanging around. At one point, it was expected to clear as a potential watch item by the time we hit the 8 o'clock hour. Just now, 7 o'clock here. This was the original liftoff time for this Kyper 1 mission, Kyper Atlas 1, depending on whether you're talking from ULA's nomenclature or from Amazon's. I want to go actually back out to the turn basin shot if we can for just a second. Draw your attention to one of the things that Brian was mentioning. He said, and was showing you on the radar, that the storms were pushing off, moving towards the south and slightly to the east, but you can see there's still quite a bit of cloud cover hanging around right now as the systems move through, and those storms need to get about 10 nautical miles away from the pad for this to not be an impact to launch. Obviously, they're also considering the strong winds as a factor here for whether or not they'll be able to get this Atlas off the ground today or not. If, when all is said and done, they do decide that today is just not the day to fly, they do have another launch opportunity coming up tomorrow, and the weather, as the most recent published launch weather forecast shows, significantly better, with just a 10% chance of violating weather conditions, or put another way, 90% go, and the winds in a 24-hour turnaround scenario are trending between 10 to 15 knots. As we continue to roll through the countdown, I want to thank the now more than 11,000 of you who are watching with us live. Really appreciate you being here with us on this Atlas, hopefully, launch evening. If you haven't already, you could do us a big solid just by clicking that like button. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Let the YouTube algorithm do its thing. Also want to thank a few folks for your support here in the live chat. Want to welcome new channel member CK joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, CK. We're glad to have you with us. Also want to thank Mitchell Wilbur, one of our previously existing channel members as well, for a very generous $50 super chat. Really appreciate that, Mitchell. Thank you so much for supporting us at that level and for the kind words. Says Will is the best. And his Praetorian Guard keeping it clean. Callistia Lee, Astro Joe, Jeff, and Rick, quite the team. And I would have to concur with that. Our moderators help make this live coverage as wonderful as it is, and a good experience for all of you joining with us live. And last for now, certainly not least, I want to thank Pierce Mama for a also very generous $20 super chat saying, don't want no scrub. You're here to that. Want to take a look now, as a number of folks have been asking about the trajectory for this mission here. United Launch Alliance does the courtesy for those in the public of posting not just the trajectory, but also giving you an idea of when you should be able to see this rocket as it makes its ascent. So if you look at those ever-expanding circles that are numbered 1, obviously closest to the pad, and then 2, 3, so on and so forth, that's the timing with which you should be able to see, again, assuming that you're in clear conditions where you are along the east coast of the United States. You can see the breakdown on the left-hand side about how long post-liftoff it'll be before the rocket is potentially visible in your neck of the woods. Time now just about L minus 34 minutes. ULA is bringing in the mission audio loops into the broadcast, so we should be hearing some call-outs here as part of our broadcast too. And as with any other launch, I will do my level best to not talk over mission control audio as it's being broadcast, as we want to hear the calls along with you to make sure that we're all understanding where we are with this mission and any other updates as they come about. Getting some questions in the live chat about what the L minus time is, since it's not what we normally see with a SpaceX Falcon 9 launch, for example. L minus time is what's counting towards the planned liftoff of the Atlas V rocket. If you see in the big box on the left-hand side of your screen, just beneath the ULA logo, the T minus clock is still holding at T minus 4 minutes. And once the L minus clock gets down to L minus 4, assuming that ULA in the intervening 32 minutes and some change hasn't made a determination that they need to extend the hold, then they would proceed into the terminal count and the two clocks would sync up. So, put another way, the L minus time is counting down to the launch. The T minus clock is counting down to the terminal time. And since we're still in a hold for the terminal countdown, and that's why that clock is not moving. Had everything moved smoothly with this launch opportunity, had the weather cooperated and the issue with the liquid hydrogen system on the Centaur upper stage not come about, and ULA been able to proceed straight into the opening of the window with a liftoff at 7 p.m., then the L minus clock would have gone away 4 minutes to 7 p.m., synced up with the T minus clock, and we'd be well off to the races by this point. But ULA has a 2-hour window that extends out to 9 p.m. Eastern, 100 UTC. So still time to play with if they need to. This is a nice shot of the Atlas V rocket, not only because it gives us another good vantage point of the vehicle itself, but also shows with a little bit more contrast the clouds and the sky beyond it. It's a little bit hard to see from our vantage point here at the press site, as well as at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station from our ground level, how the clouds are moving. So this gives us a nice idea of what things are like actually at the pad level. Also, for those curious about what the structure is that is just to the right, or on the right-hand side of the big box, that large tower, and you can see one just off to the side of it. Come out to the wide shot here from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station from our photographer Michael Kane's perspective, and you can see a little bit more distinctively, those are the lightning protection towers that help ensure that the rocket is kept safe, as well as the other pad infrastructure should there be a thunderstorm passing over. Of course, this is Florida, the lightning strike capital of, I don't know if it's the world or just the country, but there are quite a number of thunderstorms that come through the Sunshine State.
LC Field 2.
Go ahead, Field 2.
First step 660. Centaur LH2 is at 99.8% at 2310 Zulu.
Roger.
Now about 28 and a half minutes to go in the L minus clock. The current T0 time exists now of 7:40. As a reminder for those who may just be joining live or not as familiar with Atlas rockets, unlike with a SpaceX Falcon 9 or a Falcon Heavy potentially, there will not be an attempt to recover the first stage booster following liftoff and stage separation. That's not to say that United Launch Alliance isn't working towards a model of reusability, but that won't be the case for the Atlas line of rockets, which are getting ready to ride off into the sunset. There are just a finite number of them left. 8 of them will be used by Amazon for its Project Kyper satellite constellation, including the one that you see here on your screen, which hopefully, weather permitting, will be able to launch in just about 27.5 minutes. There are also 6 other Atlas rockets that have been reserved for flights of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft up to the International Space Station as part of NASA's Commercial Crew program. And then the last Atlas rocket is reserved for Viasat with one of its Viasat 3 satellites.
LC, Fuel 2.
Go Fuel 2.
First up 700, Centaur LH2 has been above 99.8% for 5 minutes.
Roger. PNA2, LC.
Go ahead, LC.
Perform Centaur LH2 SUV cycle test.
Roger. LCP2.
Go PNA2.
Centaur Cryo SEV cycle test is complete.
Roger. OSLC.
Design.
Perform data transfer to backup CCLS.
Roger.
Oh, minus 20 minutes.
We're now at 20 minutes and counting, as you just heard.
LC locks 1.
Go Locks.
Atlas LO2 remains at flight level.
Roger.
LC locks 2.
Go.
Centaur LO2 at flight level.
Roger.
LC Fuel 2.
Go Field 2.
Centaur LH2 at flight level.
Roger.
All of the teams that are monitoring the various cryogenic propellant levels
LC,
checking in.
this is LD on 1.
Go LD.
Please coordinate a new T0 of 00:03.
Roger. 0003.
Good copy. Thank you.
ALC. LC.
Go ahead.
Please set the clock for a new T0 0003.
Roger.
RCLC.
RC in 1.
Please coordinate with the range a new T0 of 0003.
Roger, Wilco.
And as you just heard over
LD.
the
LC. That
nets,
one.
LD.
Yeah, LD. Our launch vehicle issues are resolved. We are just currently red on winds at this time.
Thank you, LC.
and as we've been following along with the weather updates from Brian Sizik and
ALC.
through the
Go.
Countdown clock has been set for a new T0 of 03000.
Roger. All right, for the team, for our new T0, L count is L minus 41 minutes. And SCI LC, channel 1.
This is SC on 1, filling in for SCI.
Okay, yeah, just want to make sure aware of the T0 change.
Yep, they copied that.
Roger.
And as you can see with our countdown clock, L minus 40 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. Winds remain the sticking point here as ULA is reset the T0 now targeting 8:03 p.m. Eastern. 8:03 p.m. Eastern, 0003 UTC is our new current T0. We're now in the back half of the launch window as it currently exists today, with that window closing at 9 p.m. Eastern, 0100 UTC.
And as you just heard, we do have
As
a
you
new
heard from the mission control, winds remain the sticking point here, hoping that they will diminish as the countdown rolls on. ULA remaining in that T minus 4 minute hold and is being extended out now for about another 35 minutes, barring another change in the T0, of course.
The range has approved our new T0 of 00:03 Zulu.
Roger.
Now about 36 minutes to the current T0 of 8:03 p.m. Eastern, 0003 UTC. Again, as a reminder, ULA does have a 2-hour launch window today, which extends out to 9 p.m. tonight. We're still tracking some storms that are offshore right now. Taking a look at the turn basin camera, you can see some break in the clouds from our perspective here at the Kennedy Space Center press site. But those offshore storms still presenting a potential watch item. We'll hopefully be getting another weather briefing from Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik here in the next probably 15 minutes or so. giving an update on these offshore storms. It's a little bit hard to show in our camera view at this present moment in time, but colleague Stephen Young just taking a look out the window, seeing what appears to be a very tall anvil cloud that is hanging around just a little bit north of the pad. Anvil clouds were not listed as a watch item coming into this launch opportunity, but the reason that those can become tricky is anvil clouds have the potential to extend out the impact of a thunderstorm well beyond the main area that the cell exists. So launch weather officers keep a very close eye out for anvil clouds that are in the vicinity of the pad, and especially if they are moving towards the launch pad around the time of a planned launch. We're now currently L minus 28 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. Again, we are still in the planned 4-minute hold at T minus 4 minutes. The L minus count is counting down towards the planned liftoff of the Atlas V rocket. Nice little view of the moon peeking out now that we've got some break in the clouds from our vantage point at the press site. For those who may have been listening into Jared Isaacman's confirmation hearing as he is being considered to be the next NASA administrator, a lot of conversations about the moon and as it is laid out currently in U.S. law, the moon to Mars architecture and taking the moon as a pathway towards getting humans to the red planet eventually. Several lawmakers asking Isaacman in a variety of different ways about his perspective on this. And his prepared remarks and in his opening statement, he described a need and want to have essentially a dual track of importance of getting these moon missions funded and in a faster pipeline of operation, while simultaneously moving more aggressively towards a eventual crewed mission to Mars and building up the various pieces and parts that would be needed to support that. Notable for lawmakers' concern and wanting to get some clarification on what exactly that means for the Space Launch System rocket, as well as the Orion spacecraft, which is currently rated for taking humans. Oh, that's a fabulous shot of the moon from our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions. Appreciate that, Pete. Of course, Artemis 2 won't land on the moon. It'll take a lap around our satellite and bring the astronauts back down for a splashdown off the coast of California. They've been doing a number of drills. In fact, they just wrapped up a recovery drill, sort of full complement with the USSS, I believe it's the USSS San Diego, is the support ship that's used for Artemis 2 Orion recovery. You can see a little bit of the clouds that are passing in between our camera and the moon there. Really nice shot, but gives you an idea. Actually, if we go back to the wide shot, you can get a sense of the context of what those clouds look like as they're starting to obscure our view of the moon, unfortunately. Based off of the multiple times that Isaacman was asked about the Artemis program, the Space Launch System rocket, and the Orion spacecraft, essentially it came down to a question and an answer that was, I'm apologize, I'm blanking on the senator that asked it. I know Senator Cruz from Texas asked a number of times about that, but I don't remember if it was in response to him or to the senator from Kansas. I think it's Senator Marin. But essentially, Isaacman said that the Artemis 2 and 3 missions that are in the works, it sounded like he is fully backing those as they're currently architected right now. So if you take things at face value and, you know, from all the information that we were able to gather today and put it in the context of President Trump's comments that he made during his inauguration address and repeated again during his address to Congress, this administration focusing on Mars mission and really has that as a focal point for them. It sounds like there's still going to be room for lunar exploration with astronauts. And, you know, one of the big takeaways you can gather from at least the senator's perspective today is that they are very much wanting the SLS rocket and the Artemis program, largely as it exists, to stick around, and for NASA, along with its international partners, to establish a sustained presence on the lunar surface. Of course, we'll have to see once the confirmation process concludes, and if Jared Isaacman is confirmed as the 15th NASA administrator. We need to get past that point and Then, of course, the other big piece of this is the budget coming out of Congress. Right now, we're excuse me, currently in another continuing resolution that'll last until the end of this fiscal year, and then they have to make a determination on a formal budget. Also, I don't believe I've seen the president's budget request to see what the White House is wanting to lay out for NASA and its priorities from the administration's perspective. So all of that's going to have to come into play, and we'll see where the cards land at that point. And I realize just spent the last 4 or 5 minutes talking about political process with the confirmation hearing. Recognize that. Want to respect the moderators in the live chat. Again, our policy about not delving into overt politics, and I think you understand what we mean by that this is not a generally speaking political forum, so we really don't talk politics very often. It's only when an important space and space flight related item enters into the political arena that we need to talk about it. And obviously the confirmation or the confirmation hearing of the next NASA administrator very much falls within those guidelines. So a little bit of a gray zone here. Just, want to lay that out for all of y'all. As we're approaching the 20-minute mark here for the current T0 of 8:03 p.m. Eastern, 0003 UTC, want to talk about some of the infrastructure that Amazon has been bringing to bear in order to support its Project Kyper internet constellation. One of those is right here at the Kennedy Space Center at what was formerly the shuttle landing facility, now under the purview of
L
Space
minus 20
Florida.
minutes.
Taking a look right now at the payload processing facility.
LC, this is LD on 1.
Go LD.
Please coordinate a new T0 of 00:22.
Roger, 0022 Zulu.
Good copy.
ALC, LC.
Go ahead.
Please set the clock for a new T0 0022 Zulu.
Roger.
RC, LC.
RC on 1.
Please coordinate with the range, new T0 0022 Zulu.
Roger, welcome.
And as you just heard, a new T0 has been called for by the launch team there at the ASOC.
LC, ALC.
The
Go.
Countdown clock has been set for new T0 of 0022 Zulu.
Roger. All right, for the team, we're at L minus 37 minutes.
The ASOC is the Advanced Spaceflight Operations Center. It's where ULA runs its Atlas and Vulcan countdown operations from.
LCRC, that one.
Garci.
Roger, the new T000:22 has been coordinated approved by the range.
Roger.
Picking up where we left off, now that we're back at just under L minus 36 minutes, leading up to the new current T0 liftoff time of 8:22 p.m. Taking a look at the fairly newly finished Amazon payload processing facility. For those who have seen one of the distribution sites around the country, this will look somewhat familiar, but obviously on the inside it is quite distinct. If we can go to the next slide, you can see an image inside the payload processing facility there at the Kennedy Space Center's launch and landing facility managed by Space Florida. Looking down one of those corridors, you can see the payload fairings there that are encapsulating the 27 Kyper satellites that are currently on board the Atlas V rocket you see there in the live box on the right-hand side of your screen. This 100,000 square foot facility was brought online in order to allow Kyper, or Project Kyper, which is a subsidiary of Amazon, to have dedicated space in order to process the satellites as they're shipped into Florida for missions on board the Atlas V rocket, the Vulcan rocket, and presumably also for missions that would fly on SpaceX Falcon 9 would probably be processed here, and then those payload fairings rolled out to the pad at either Launch Complex 39A or Slick 40. Blue Origin also going to be flying at least 12 launches of the Kyper Constellation satellites, with an option to add another 15 launches with the new Glenn rocket. So those satellites would also be processed here. We actually had the opportunity to be at the groundbreaking for this payload processing facility. That was back in the summer of 2023, actually, just shortly after I joined on board the team here at Spaceflight Now. So a marquee memory in my mind of heading out there to the launch and landing facility, seeing dirt move here at what is now a completed payload processing facility. A lot of scaffolding and just steel beams at that point in time. So they've come a long way in the intervening year and a half and some change. We can go to the next slide after this and get a little bit closer view of the payload fairings that are going to be launching this mission when weather permits. This is as the transport vehicle was leaving the payload processing facility and making the trek out to Slick 40, where that was hoisted atop of the Centaur upper stage in the Atlas stack, integrated with the second stage of the vehicle. Now, Amazon has been quite protective when it comes to any images of its Kuiper satellites. At this point in time, with a very small exception at the end of one of their promotional videos, we really haven't, well, not really, we haven't seen an actual full image of an entire Kuiper satellite that has been publicly released at this point. If you happen to go to the launch page from United Launch Alliance to take a look at the launch timeline, which we'll walk through here in just a little bit, you can see the launch timeline cuts off at Centaur first main engine cutoff, or MECO 1, about 18 minutes, 14 seconds into flight. And so we don't expect to see the Kuiper satellites on this mission today or whenever ULA is able to launch this mission, weather permitting. Hopefully following the deployment of this first batch of Kuiper satellites, once the signal is acquired, checkouts are performed, Amazon will be willing to release some imagery of the Kuiper satellites and give folks more of an idea of what they look like. We also don't have a firm idea of how many satellites can go on all the other launch providers beyond ULA. Thankfully, with our conversations that we've had with ULA President and CEO Tori Bruno in a variety of settings, he's described the Atlas rocket as being able to carry 27 Kuiper satellites, and the Vulcan rocket capable of carrying 45 Kuiper satellites into low Earth orbit. However, we don't know what the number is for the New Glenn, for Falcon 9, or for the Ariane 6. That's still something that hopefully Amazon will clarify at some point in the future. We've reached out asking for that information, and that request for information was not granted by Amazon at this point.
Welcome back. We're joining you from
Unfortunately, we haven't seen the weather trend as favorably as we were hoping. So let's take a live look at radar right now. You can see there's this stubborn convergent band of showers that's remaining just inside our 10 nautical mile ring from the launch pad, which is about right here. And so some of these clouds are getting above the minus 20 Celsius altitude, which is over 20,000 feet. And because of that, they have to be outside of the 10 nautical mile ring from the launch pad. So you can see we were hoping they'd push a little bit further to the east, but they've almost trended a little bit further to the west, closer to the pad. So that's why we haven't been able to clear this cumulus cloud roll. Again, those clouds could have electrification that could potentially trigger a lightning strike. So that's why this rule exists, to prevent a rocket-triggered lightning strike. And we're also monitoring the winds as well. So it's the cumulus cloud rule and elevated winds. So you can see we are maybe seeing a little bit of a drop down in some of these wind speeds. We are still seeing a few gusts in the low 30s, but a lot now getting into the 20s. So maybe trending down a little bit in the winds, but we're going to need that trend to continue. So we're still watching those showers just off the coast, and we need these winds to come down as well. So guys, we'll be watching, and again, if we can get the weather to clear, the launch weather team will find that opportunity and call the go call. Back to you.
Just heard from our...
And as you may have noticed with our countdown clock on the upper right-hand corner of the screen, there is a new T0 time of 8:39 p.m. Eastern, 8:39 p.m. Eastern, 0039 UTC, to try and get this Kyper 1 mission off the ground here from Slick 41. Weather has proved quite tricky and may ultimately prove to be insurmountable tonight, as you just saw with the update from Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik, that line of thunderstorms that is off the coast. Taking a look right now, if we can bring in the box from the ULA broadcast here. Actually, taking a look inside the ASOC. This is the Advanced Spaceflight Operations Center that I was mentioning earlier in the broadcast. This is part of the team that is running the launch operations here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. All closely monitoring the weather, seeing if there is a path forward, as a new T0 was just set for 8:39 p.m. Eastern, 0039 UTC. Another view of the launch control team. This is actually the Operations Support Center, closer to where I am right now in Denver, Colorado. So about an hour and a half north of where I am here in Colorado Springs at the 40th Space Symposium. We've got our majority of our launch team back in Florida, who's holding it down, bringing you all these great vantage points of the Atlas V rocket. Meanwhile, I'm here at the Space Symposium talking with a lot of folks about a lot of really cool things that are happening on the space front. And this is a look at the launch leadership team, the Mission Directors Center, as you can see denoted in the bottom left-hand corner of this big box, as they are hoping to find some clearance with the weather here. The outlook still looking not so good, if I may make an 8-ball reference, or a Magic 8-ball reference, I should say. If the weather doesn't clear, we'll have to chalk it up to another Magic 8-ball message, which is try again later. And if that is the case, weather does look significantly better in a 24-hour turnaround scenario. So we will keep you posted for any additional updates to the T0 as the case may be. Once all is said and done, the Project Kyper satellite internet constellation will consist
This is Atlas
of
Mission Control at T-minus
3,232 satellites in low Earth orbit, as well as a quite expansive ground infrastructure that extends across the globe. In addition to just general consumer availability for the Kuiper constellation once it is available, Amazon is also interested in targeting government contracts that will need more proprietary access to the Kuiper constellation using the same satellites but for different, more sensitive purposes. And that is run through a business that is technically a different division of Amazon, a different subsidiary. It's called Kyper Government Solutions, LLC. Kyper Government Solutions, LLC actually has a booth here on the exhibitor floor at the Space Symposium. It's just around the corner from where some other folks, including NASA, the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and Redwire Space are located. For those of you who are here at the symposium and wanted to check that out, that's where that is located, up in the North Hall of the exhibit floor. And in fact, earlier this week on a Monday, KGS and L3 Harris Technologies announced a partnership for a combined service to help make their case for additional government contracts that may become available for that service. So they've been talking with a lot of folks throughout the course of the conference about offering the Kyper satellite internet constellation once it is established for different government needs. And essentially, a way to think of it is, it sounds like, from what we've been able to gather from the Kyper constellation and what the Kyper Government Solutions division would be able to offer, more similar to what would be available, say, using the Starshield satellites that are developed by SpaceX in partnership with Northrop Grumman, according to reporting, that are distinct and different from the Starlink satellite constellation. As we're cruising towards 32 minutes on the L- clock, I want to thank the about 14,000 and a half of you that are joining with us live this evening, hoping that things trend in a better direction, that we can get a launch of the Atlas V rocket this evening. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button. Sharing the stream allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage tonight. Also want to thank a few folks in the live chat as well for your support this evening. Our thanks to NYL3 for a $5 super chat, who says, excellent launch videos, keep them coming. We certainly intend to do so, assuming that we're able to get a launch tonight. Channel member and moderator Rick Donner with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Rick. Glad to see you out of the hospital. Hope you're doing much better. Rick says, Will, enjoy the Springs, referring to Colorado Springs. I retired out of Fort Carson there, and my uncle is buried at the Academy. Beautiful place. That's a very cool connection you have to this area. It's actually my first time in Colorado Springs, so very much enjoying seeing the Space Symposium now in its 40th year. Callistia Lee with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Callistia, for super chat at that level. Says donation to Will's Halls and Tea Fund. Hoping you're having fun at the symposium. And yes, it has been quite enjoyable. I pause just because while there is a lot to see and to do here at the symposium, there's also a lot to see and do here at the symposium. So it's kind of hard to really take in everything. I think I've seen, at least briefly in passing, all of the exhibitor booths, but it's hard to find time to talk to even, I'd say, a majority of the exhibitors that are here. But still got another full day left of the conference tomorrow, so hoping to make at least a couple more laps before all is said and done. If you happen to be here at the symposium and see me cruising about, be sure to say hi. It's always great to meet folks out and about in the community. I also want to thank channel member Joe Piano with a $20 super chat as well. Appreciate that support at that level, Joe, who simply says, Spaceflight now rocks. Thank you for the kind words. Now less than 30 minutes to the planned T0, and we'll have to wait and see if we've got a new T0 coming our way. Given the weather trending as it is, don't fall out of your chair with shock if you're sitting down and catch an update that the T0 has shifted. Seems quite probable at this point, I would say. But we'll be sure to update you as soon as there is a determination made if a new T0 is warranted. Now coming up on L minus 20 minutes here in just less than 30 seconds. We would expect there to be another weather briefing coming shortly after we pass the 20-minute point in time. Of course, if that is another on-camera briefing by Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik, we'll bring that to you live as it happens. And as you can see with our countdown clock, the countdown clock has now been reset at L minus 37 minutes and about 30 seconds. As ULA is pushing to basically the end of the window, this was probably going to be their last opportunity at 8:59 p.m. Eastern, 00:59 UTC. The window formally closes at 9 o'clock, so barring another Sorry, just listening for an update. Again, the new T0 of 8:59 essentially puts them at the end of the window, barring another opportunity that would exist within a 60-second period beyond that. But given the margins and the periods of which they have been going through their launch window tonight, I would say that's very probably unlikely.
00:59.
Roger.
The range has accepted the new T0 of 8:59 p.m. Eastern. Again, weather has been the sticking point for this launch attempt all night long, and seems like there's not going to be any reprieve, barring a Hail Mary in the next 35 minutes. But given the look at the weather forecast from the recent updates, and hopefully we'll get another one coming up here shortly, it does not look terribly favorable for a launch attempt this evening. Again, they've not made a determination that the game has been called. Of course, they just named a new T0 and have at least one more opportunity at the end of the window today. Let's listen to Brian Sizik.
Not seeing a great trend, but the best chance we have to get this weather to clear is at the end of the window. So that's why the launch team, they've been in communication with the launch weather team that is on console right now, and they are obviously monitoring the situation very closely. But again, here is what we've been dealing with all night, really. We have this convergent band of showers, that north to south oriented band that's moving. Kind of the whole line is pushing a little bit to the south. Now, we were hoping it would push farther off to the east, but notice it's progressed a little bit closer to the pad. But there's actually another way that we can clear this cumulus cloud roll, and that's if the tops of these showers get lower and the showers begin to dissipate. So the two ways, they could either push farther away from the pad, or they could weaken, where if the tops get low enough, that standoff distance actually gets smaller and smaller. So in other words, they can be farther away from the pad, or excuse me, they can get closer to the pad, and if the showers are weaker, then we don't have to be concerned about them. So those are the two ways that we could clear the cumulus cloud roll. We're also monitoring the winds as well, and as we take a live look at some of the winds we're seeing, notice we're still seeing winds in the upper 20s to low 30s miles per hour. These are gusts at the surface. The launch pad is right around here, so we're also monitoring winds up a few hundred feet as well. So again, the two things we need to clear that the launch weather team is going to be monitoring up until the wire here at our last T0 in the window, the cumulus cloud roll and the winds. Guys, back to you.
And a good thorough update from Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik, noting, as we had suspected, that this is in fact the last opportunity to launch this Atlas V rocket this evening, 8:59 p.m. Eastern. 00:59 UTC is the last chance we've got. So come hell or high water, we are 32 minutes, 45 seconds away from either a launch or potentially a scrub in the intervening time. We'll keep you updated, of course, as new weather information becomes available, or if ULA makes a determination in the next 30 minutes before we get down to it. Likely, if they feel like they're not going to be able to proceed with a launch, they would make that call before they would get into the terminal count at the L-4 minute point in time. Want to take a moment, since we are waiting on this Atlas V to have clear weather for launch, take a little bit further away from us. You're looking at one of the gas giants in our neck of the celestial neighborhood. This is, of course, Jupiter. And we've got a nice view of its moons here in this shot. Start from the bottom and work our way top to the top. At the bottom of the screen of the big box, you're looking at the moon Europa, the destination for both the European Space Agency's JUICE spacecraft, as well as the Europa Clipper, of course, which are set to arrive in, I believe, 2029 for JUICE and 2030 for JUICE and 2031. If I've got my dates right for Europa Clipper. Just above that, you have Ganymede, then Jupiter itself. Above Jupiter, you've got the moon of Io, and then if Pete can tilt down, I think just off frame there, you've got Callisto there at the top of the box. Just slipped out of frame. There it is. Our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions bringing us this view of the gas giant Jupiter. Working on seeing if we can adjust the exposure a little bit just so we can see the bands of Jupiter with a little bit more clarity. Right now we're exposed to show you the moons, but going to hopefully be able to adjust this here in just a moment so we can see some more of the definition, some of the rings or the bands of gas moving. And I guess we're going to have to come back to that shortly here. Troubleshooting some automatic versus manual settings, but we'll get that sorted here in just a moment. We've still got 30 minutes before the planned launch of this Atlas V rocket, so we've got time to bring that to you here in just a little bit. As we take a look at the live chat, I want to thank the nearly 16,000 of you who are here watching with us live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button. Allows more folks to find their way into this, hopefully, live launch coverage by the time that L- clock hits 0. I also want to thank Matthew Booth for a $2 super chat as well. And we've got a view of Jupiter with the exposure adjusted so you can see a little bit more definition in the gas giant. One of the nifty exhibits that is here at the Space Symposium, actually concerning not Jupiter, but another one of the gas giants and its moons, Titan. The Dragonfly rotocopter mission that is being developed and partly by Lockheed, partly by NASA through the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. That's looking to launch in 2027, I believe. Got my dates straight. And that is launching on a Falcon Heavy rocket. Time now currently 25 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. I want to share one of the photos that I snapped while on the exhibit floor here at the Space Symposium. This is actually at the Amazon Project Kyper booth, and you can see these models of the customer terminals that will eventually become available once service begins with enough satellites on orbit. They've got 3 primary customer terminals, as you can see from the far left in the back corner going up to the bigger one. This is a range that exists. I believe the largest one actually is one that I think, based off of what I was reading about the Kyper Government Solutions, is the one that's reserved for government customers. Potentially, that was in part of the literature that they had available at the Kyper booth. But broadly speaking, Project Kyper will have 3 customer terminals. One, their compact model, which they describe as less than 11 inches square and delivers speeds up to 400 megabits per second. They say they can produce it for less than $400 and expect the cost to go down beyond that. Their so-called enterprise grade model is described as, quote, a full duplex antenna that measures 19 inches by 30 inches. It can deliver speeds up to 1 gigabit per second for demanding enterprise, government, and telecommunications applications, which it looks like that's actually the big one that you see there closest to the camera from my perspective. And then the far one in the corner, I think that is the ultra compact model, which measures at 7 inches square, about the size of a Kindle, of course, tying in another Amazon product, and delivers speeds of up to 100 megabits per second.
We did just get a weather briefing from the lead launch weather officer on this mission, my colleague Brian Belson. So what he briefed the launch team is we are watching this line of showers. We're getting new radar scans about every 5 minutes or so, and we're watching to see, are these cloud tops coming down at all? Also, are they remaining connected? Because if they're connected, you kind of have to treat the whole line as one and then just use the closest point to the pad. But if we can find some breaks in that line and the taller cloud tops aren't connected to the ones that are closest to the launch pad right here, then we could potentially get out of that violation as well. So we are still no-go for the cumulus cloud rule, but we're watching these new radar scans coming in to see if we could potentially clear it. So he gave an 80% probability of violation, so that's a 20% chance of go by the end of the window and our last T0. But again, there still is a little bit of hope, and that's what we're watching. We need these cloud tops to come down, or we need to see a little break in the connection here where we could potentially get out of the violation that way. So that's what the launch weather team is tracking. This is a minute-by-minute thing that we're monitoring. We're waiting for the new radar scans to come in, and that's what the team is watching, in addition to the winds as well. Guys, back to you.
We're now back once again to within 20 minutes of the planned T0 time. As you just heard, though, from Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik, the weather remains 80% no-go for the launch opportunity at the end of the window, 8:59 p.m. Eastern, 00:59 UTC. Seems like there's still a possibility for the cumulus cloud rule to clear as a potential violation, but of course the winds are still a factor in this as well. You can't separate the two tonight, it seems. I want to take a look now just briefly. You can see the engine bells of the RD-180 engine that powers the Atlas V rocket at the base of the vehicle. Atlas booster burns a combination of RP-1 rocket propellant 1, which is a highly purified kerosene, and liquid oxygen, producing 860,200 pounds or 3.83 meganewtons of thrust at sea level. It's also supported in this configuration, which is called 551. I believe the ULA nickname for this one is the Bruiser. 5 solid rocket boosters provided by Northrop Grumman that add an additional 371,500 pounds or 1.6 meganewtons of thrust each. The booster of an Atlas V rocket stands.
I am directing a launch scrub for today's operations. Please proceed with preparations for an extended turnaround with the next launch attempt under review.
Roger, Ellie. All right, team, direct operation 60, or excuse me.
As you just heard, we are unfortunately scrubbed for tonight. Can't say it was a surprising outcome given the challenge that has been presented to ULA throughout the course of the evening with those persistent offshore showers that just wouldn't budge with enough relief to allow the launch to proceed. As you heard from the launch team, they are going through the process of detanking and safing the rocket. They are looking at potential launch opportunities coming up in the future. If they are able to launch tomorrow, though, the weather does look dramatically better. It was forecast to be 90% chance of favorable weather Thursday evening, with just the cumulus cloud rule coming into effect. Reading from the launch mission forecast. The high pressure in the area would be limiting the development of showers in the area. With a scrub call here, ULA is looking for future launch opportunities. As I mentioned, weather tomorrow, if that were an option, or if that is an option, I should say, does look much better. However, for those who've checked our launch schedule page, you know that SpaceX is currently targeting a launch Thursday evening at 9:40 or 9:54 p.m. Eastern, 01:54 UTC. So it may be that SpaceX actually has the range tomorrow, and given the launch window that ULA has with this mission of 7 to 9 p.m., that SpaceX may have the range, which essentially would mean that SpaceX gets priority in the Thursday timeframe, which would potentially preclude ULA from going for another launch attempt tomorrow, as the case may be. In any event, we will continue to keep you apprised of any additional updates, or when additional updates become. We'll, of course, let you know on our social channels as well as on our website, spaceflightnow.com, when this first batch of Kyper satellites is able to get off the ground. I want to thank all of our moderators in the live chat for supporting us with our live coverage today. Thanks to Aussie Space Girl, Callisti Lee, Rick Donner, Astro Joe, the whole team. Really appreciate y'all helping us out today in the live chat. Oh, and a thanks to Rusty Shackelford as well. Appreciate all of the mods who've been. And Mark Otto was helping out today, too. Thanks to the mods for reminding me of all the mods that we have. It's a team effort here, and it's been a long day here at Space Symposium. So coming off of one element of work, going right into live launch coverage, and unfortunately ended up with a scrub. But really appreciate our team that helps make these live launch opportunities possible, even when it does end in a scrub. Want to thank our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images for being on standby, as well as Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions. Want to thank our photographers out in the field for being at the ready to capture images of this Atlas V rocket had it been able to launch. Thanks to Michael Kane, to Adam Bernstein, and John Pisani. Thanks as well to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most importantly, I want to thank you for wherever you have been watching this broadcast tonight. We hope you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on notifications, ring that bell so you get alerted the next time we go live or post new videos here on YouTube. We've been doing lots of videoing while we've been here at the Space Symposium. Still more to do coming up tomorrow, so I'll look forward to bringing you coverage that we've got from here in the days and weeks to come. Lots of cool stories to tell coming out of Space Symposium number 40. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.